Hi, I'm Kitty Feldy, and welcome to another edition of the Book Club of the Year for Young Adults. Today we're talking about a pretty scary novel. It is called Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer, and a trio of discussants are with us here today. We're talking to a trio of 7th and 8th graders from Sinai Akiba out in West LA. It is Rebecca Moretti. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi.
Also, it is Jonah Schatz. Hi, Jonah.
Hi.
And Alex Moge. Hello, Alex.
Hi.
Hi. So let's talk a bit about this book. Well, actually, we got an email from the writer. The writer emailed us from the road. She's at a writers' conference or an English teachers' conference, and she said, forgot to ask you to say hi to the students for me and to thank them for having taken the time to read and discuss Life as We Knew It. And the question she wanted to ask was, did anything really freak you out or scare you in this particular book?
A lot of things did.
Well, let's talk about what it's about. Who wants to give me the plot?
Well, basically it's about this teenage girl, and her life is normal. You know, she has swimming, she has friends, she has grades, and then all of a sudden, like, this catastrophe happens and her world is turned upside down.
Well, let's describe the catastrophe, Alex.
Well, a comet actually hits the moon, and it hits it out of orbit, and it comes close to Earth, and many catastrophes happen because when the moon is out of orbit, many unusual catastrophes happen.
Like what, Jonah?
It controls the tides. And so there's tsunamis, you got big waves, you have earthquakes, you have storms and weather changing. Yeah.
It wipes out quite a bit of the population of the Earth.
Yeah.
And things seem to get worse and worse and worse in this book.
Yeah, they really do.
So a little cheerful book you guys got to read, spend time with.
Well,
I was reading this book for the second time over the weekend when all the big brush fires were raging, you know. And when the sky was so full of smoke and it turned that hideous yellowish color, all I could think of was that was what it was like living with that volcanic ash that was covering the
Yeah,
skies.
except it was like a million times worse in the book.
So I should not complain.
and it was darker, which we didn't really get that much.
Well, let's talk about our main character, because it's told in the form of a diary. So
Yeah.
tell us what we know about her.
Her name is Miranda, and she's 16 years old. She cares very much about her grades, and like throughout the book, we learn a lot about her, like about her personality that we would have never known.
Like
That she's really brave, and that she like cares about her family a lot, and she's willing to sacrifice a lot of things for her family and her friends.
Like what?
Well, she ends up she gives up some of her meals a day so that her siblings and her mother could have her food. And yeah.
Alex, tell me about the family relationship.
Well, before, they're a pretty close family. There's a dad and a mom. They got divorced, and actually at the beginning of the book, Lisa is married to her father.
Lisa is the new girlfriend and the father's new girlfriend.
Yeah. Well, they just got married, and they had she's pregnant, and they asked her to be the godmother at the beginning.
Miranda.
Yes.
Yeah, and then they were all really close at the beginning, not many fights, and I think as the book went on, they even got closer, but they had some fights on the way.
Did this family seem real, or was it too idealized for you?
I thought it
Jonah?
seemed pretty real.
Yeah. Why?
Because usually you have families where they're just a family, and they have the same. They eat together. They have a brother who's somewhere else, and it's common with a sibling at college. Yeah. So yeah, they're a pretty common family.
Now this takes place in Pennsylvania, but what, middle of Pennsylvania someplace away from the coast,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I kept thinking about what would happen to me in California.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, they said.
Am I too close to the coast, or would the Baldwin Hills protect
Probably.
me, or I don't know. I don't know. Did that thought go through your mind too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like in the book it said that all of California was wiped out, basically, so I was like, oh, there I go.
But then you ask yourself, would it have been better to go first or to sit around and wait? Because things don't seem to get better in this book.
Well, I think that as long as I had my family and we were able to supply for each other, and then I would say just to go as far as you can, because things could get better, things could start clearing up a little bit. So
You're an
that would be
optimist,
my
I
hope.
can tell.
I try to be.
Well, let's go to the question that Susan emailed us. She wanted to know if there was anything in particular that really scared you or upset you, that gave you nightmares, that made you think about it later. Anything you think she shouldn't have put in there?
I think when the family got sick, it was pretty scary because all her family got sick except for her. And I was thinking, if my family was so sick, so weak that they couldn't move, I don't know what I would do. And she handled it really well in the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anything scare you guys?
Well, I thought the volcanic ash in the sky kind of scared me because you couldn't even see the sky anymore. You just saw darkness, and I think it would be hard to just see dark the whole day, not know what time it was, not know when to go to sleep or when to wake up, if it's early, if it's late, and hardly go outside and do any activities.
Yeah, that seemed to me to be the hardest part, is that nobody could exercise, you know, when
Yeah.
she could barely get out to go swimming once during the summer or twice during the summer and go ice skating once. It just seemed, to me, that was like the biggest punishment, even more than all the lousy food they were eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything scare you in particular, Jonah?
Well, I was pretty frightened at the beginning when I figured out that a meteor was coming to hit the moon, because now every time I look at the moon, I think of it in a different way, and it also frightened me, the fact that the moon was coming closer to them.
Yeah.
That seems pretty strange when the moon isn't that far from the Earth.
Well, let's talk a little about that, because that has to be one of the most, you know, the moon figures so often in literature of all kinds. You've got people writing poetry about it and
Right.
symbolism and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's always been, I think, in part of people's heads. But she changes the way we look at that moon.
Right.
I mean, how does that work? How did she do that? That something so poetic and beautiful and interesting and scientific can suddenly be turned into something so creepy.
Well, it wasn't necessarily the moon, but it was the meteor that hit it that just knocked it out of its orbit. So, and it was basically the moon's fault that everything was happening, but I mean, it's still a beautiful thing. Like,
But she couldn't look at it. Miranda couldn't look at it.
yeah, she couldn't
anymore.
look at it, and at a certain point, the sky got so dark that she couldn't even see it.
Did you guys look at the moon in a different way after you read this
Yes,
book? Yes.
definitely.
Mostly during the reading of the book.
Well, it was right pretty much during the full moon period too, wasn't it?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
So what did it feel like for you to look at the moon? I mean, were you thinking in terms of how could it happen or what would happen to you here then?
Well, I was thinking of what would happen if that really happened. If a meteor hit the moon, what would I lose from the moon that I would have had before? And then what would start happening? What natural disasters would come up?
You know, there's disaster movies or big box office. I mean, there's always been, you know, whether it's
War of the Worlds.
yeah, from the
Yeah.
earlier days, or when ships turned upside down, you know, or you've got earthquakes and you've got volcanoes and you've got, you know, giant monsters eating the earth. You've got all those kinds of things. But did this seem scarier somehow?
I think it did because it was more realistic, I thought.
Oh.
Because in the real world, you usually don't think of monsters or anything like that. Because all of these things, I think, are very realistic. Like, if the moon actually did this, I think this could have been a possibility of something like this happening. And I was more scared because it was way more realistic.
Well, is there anything you think that the writer should have thought twice about? Because again, this is a book for young people. It's not a book for, you know, I don't know, old people sitting in a cabin someplace trying to scare themselves. I mean, this could really give people nightmares. Is there anything in there you thought that she should have thought twice about, or do you think it was appropriate?
I thought it was very appropriate. I thought it was something that you could think about sometimes, but I mean, I didn't think it was there to scare you. I think it was there to entertain you.
I agree.
I thought that putting Miranda, who was like one of the youngest people in the book, in that position where it was down to her to save her family, I thought that was pretty extreme, but because not a lot of people would be able to handle the situation like she did. But I thought that was good because if the character can handle it, it shows more about the character.
Now, last week here in California, we had an earthquake drill. Did you guys participate
Yeah,
in that?
at our
Yes.
school.
Did this make sense to you? I mean, did the two things sort of connect in your head? Or not really? Were they totally different? Preparing for a disaster versus reading about a different kind of a disaster and how people reacted. Alex?
Well, I thought that it was a lot different in a way because I think they're kind of different in a way that we couldn't prepare for certain things. Like you can't always prepare for a tornado or volcanoes. It's hard to get away from those things. But an earthquake, we learn what we can do. As in a tsunami or anything, the only thing we can kind of do at that time is get out of there. So I think it's a little different.
So does that make you feel more prepared, knowing there are things you can do in case of an earthquake?
Yes.
As opposed to having the moon suddenly knocking everything off?
Yeah, a lot.
It actually made me feel a little bit more scared because if people are preparing for something, it's not bound to happen, but I mean, it means that it could happen, and there's a possibility that it could happen. And that frightened me a little.
Sorry to mean to scare you guys. Now this is a book that has a female protagonist, and a lot of times the theory is that boys don't like reading books that have girls as the main character. Bother you at all, Jonah?
It didn't bother me in any way because it just made it different. There's nothing that was that different, but it didn't bother me in any way.
Alex?
Not at all.
And did you identify maybe with one of the male characters more so than Miranda?
Not really. I thought she was basically the best character.
Okay.
Well, I think she's the person we knew the most about because we're reading her diary, so that's her personal writing that she doesn't share with everybody, and so we knew more about her, so I didn't identify with any of the male characters
Well, let's
anymore.
talk about that style choice that Ms. Pfeffer chose, which was to use the first-person voice. You know, it's her voice, but to do it in literary form. She's writing this daily journal. And how did that work? Was that a good device to use?
I thought that was really interesting, actually, because as opposed to something like this happened, this happened, this happened, it's more from her point of view and more what she thinks and what she feels. So I thought that was more interesting than just being told what happens.
You guys thought did it work? Would the story have worked any better, I guess, if we had decided, if it had been told, you know, this happened to her and this happened to them, sort of that third person voice?
I like the first person because it kind of put you in her place in a sense, and it brought us into her mind, and it got us to think what she was thinking and feel how she could have felt.
Did you see, I went online and saw that there's 2 more books.
Yeah, it said
Yeah, like they're the same situation, but from another person's point of view.
from New York.
Like a boy living in New York City or something.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah.
Wow. Did you guys check them out or look at them yet?
What
There was
in
like
the-
a preview in the
Yeah.
end
Yeah.
of the book. There was like
Oh, in your copy, not in mine.
in this one.
How does
Yeah.
it look?
It looks pretty interesting. I mean, I would read it.
Would you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are so funny. I was like, okay, I'm glad I'm done with this book and I can read something else now because I didn't want to be creeped out anymore.
Well, I would take something in between them
Okay,
both.
all
I
right.
wouldn't just go straight for it. That'd be a little depressing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the other thing is, you know, you guys talked about how brave she was and the survival skills, you know, you need for such a thing. There was a book we read one time called Overboard, and it was about a girl who got swept off of a ferry and she had to survive in the water. And every time I swim in the morning now, I think about that book thinking, would I be strong enough to swim in the water for 2 days, which is basically what she had to do. Are there some survival skills you think, that would make you be able to face, you know, danger, scary things?
Well, I think sometimes there are. Sometimes from the daily activities that we do, let's say like I play sports, that may help with my physical ability to do some things that other people can't. Or if some people don't go to school, they don't know some of the things that we can do and we learn to do in school. So I think our daily lives help us with survival even though we don't always use it.
I think that's a good observation.
Like
Rebecca?
there was a part in the book where they're all sleeping in the living room, and then like there's smoke coming out of the chimney, and I was so surprised to see that she knew exactly what to do. She wet the cloth, put it over her mouth. She knew exactly all the procedures to take to keep her family safe, and I thought that was pretty amazing for a 16-year-old girl.
Did you think I wouldn't have figured that part out, or
I don't know. I probably wouldn't have.
well, you'd be coughing and choking, so you'd probably figure you needed to do something.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other characters in the book. And there's a character who never really appears, but they talk about her a lot, and that's Becky. Why do you think that? Well, let's talk a little bit about her, and then why you think the writer stuck her in there. Who is she?
Well, she's the best friend of Megan and Sammy and Miranda, of course. And she died from cancer a while ago. And when Becky died, Megan and Sammy and Miranda weren't really friends anymore. Like, they kind of split apart. And the thing that was bonding them together was Becky, basically.
So do you think there's any other reason that she was introduced in the book, or was there a reason they introduced her in the book?
I think that the reason she's in the book is because it showed hope in a way, because you hear of her twice in dreams that Miranda has, one about the pizza parlor and the other one about the store. And so both times she it makes Miranda feel that why would she not go to heaven if it seems such a great place where Becky's there and she's selling pizza, and so
not my idea of heaven, but okay.
Right, but when you don't have food for a while, pizza seems really good,
especially if you haven't had pizza for a long time. Yeah. Anything else? Can you think of anything else? Alex, why you think we needed a dead girl who we don't really know very well in a book about a whole bunch of people dying?
Well, I think it told a lot about her Miranda's past and how she used to be, I think, a little bit more happy with her friends. And it was kind of a comparison in between now and before with her friendship, because now she said she wasn't as close with Megan because she became very religious, and she wasn't the same Megan that she knew, and Sammy changed in a lot of ways, and she couldn't relate to them as much without Becky.
Now, you guys have done some studying, I would imagine, in literature about some of the devices that writers use. I was thinking that maybe the writer put it in there as foreshadowing. You guys talked about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering if having somebody who had died, if that was foreshadowing what could happen in the book for the characters, but also for you as a reader to be prepared for things to happen so that you wouldn't be so shocked or devastated when people did die in the book. I don't know, what do you think of that?
I think that Becky was kind of tied to the death subject, and I think I interpreted the dreams, like every time she had the dream, she asked Becky, "Is this heaven?" And Becky said no. So I think Becky kind of gave her that hope to go on. She said, "This isn't heaven. This isn't the way you're supposed to die."
Let's talk a little bit about religion, about Reverend Marshall. Who wants to describe him?
Well, I thought that, after Megan died from starving to death, basically, Miranda goes to the church and sees Reverend Marshall, and he doesn't look skinny at all. He looks the same, and she despises him because he turned Megan in what she is into what she was, basically. And then she goes up to him and yells at him because he was kind of asking and using his students to give him food, and then she thought he was very despicable for that. So.
Well, he's sort of our only religious figure in this book. Right. So what does that tell you about either the writer's view of religion, or what did it tell you about, what did you react? You guys go to a religious school. Did you react differently to that character?
I think Megan was pretty extremitist. Like, everything she did was pretty extreme. Like, she would spend her whole day reading the Bible, and she said, "God doesn't want me to eat." And Miranda kept telling her, how can you believe in a God that wouldn't want you to take care of yourself? And then Megan kept saying, "That's what Reverend Marshall says, that's what Reverend Marshall says." So it all kind of went back to him.
He was sort of set up as a despicable character.
Yeah.
What about Becky's faith, though? Was that something that you thought was handled well or not handled well? Realistic, not realistic?
Well, I think it's realistic because there are people who that are very extreme about their religion. I thought that it was handled a little extremely. I don't think that I think that the fact that she was giving up her food, I think that was a little extreme, and I'm sure that's possible, but that's hard to believe.
As a writer, one of the things she keeps doing is making it worse. And I kept thinking, as a writer, as a reader, how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you keep increasing the odds? You know, if you were going to write this kind of a book, how would you do that to keep the reader's interest, but also how do you keep cranking it up so that things keep getting worse?
Well, I think it was kind of a moral in a way that you got to cherish every moment, and when stuff become bad, it can get worse, and you have to cherish what you have at a certain time. So you can't be really mad when one thing happens, because it can go in another way. And like with her grades, she was really mad that she got like a B+ or something, and then she doesn't care what she gets after that at all.
At one point in the book, she says, "I should enjoy today because tomorrow is going to be worse."
And that's a cheerful thought. Did this book remind you of anything else you've ever read?
We were talking about how it kind of reminded us of a movie, actually, Cast Away.
That's the old Tom Hanks movie where
Yeah.
he finds the volleyball.
Yeah.
Why? Why does it remind you of that?
Because he comes from, normal place, he works at FedEx or something, and then just, like, something happens, like, so quick, and then everything is taken away from him, and he has to learn to deal with what he has, and then when he goes back, everything is so strange to him, because in one scene in the movie, he's, like, clicking on the light and off, how it took him, like, days to make fire, and then how the light
Easy.
just turns on at one click.
How the things we take for granted.
Yeah, and that reminded me of Miranda.
Any books this remind you of, though? Have you read anything similar?
No,
I was
this is
thinking
the
of
first
Gary
one.
Paulson's Hatchet sort of or that other book I told you about, Overboard. You know, the survival kinds of books that are out there. Would you recommend it to somebody else?
I would recommend
I
it
would.
to.
Would
Yeah.
you? What grade do you think it's appropriate for?
Probably
Maybe a
6
little older.
to 10, I think.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, good enough.
I thought our age was just right.
Okay, well then that's 7th and 8th graders, and that's a good thing. Well, let us then say goodbye, and then we're going to continue to discuss what books you guys would recommend, all right? So come up with your best books, but in the meantime, the book that we talked about today is Life as We Knew It by Susan Beth Pfeffer. So give me your very favorite book. Ever, Rebecca.
Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye, okay. Why? A lot of people hate that book, but a lot of people love that book. There's
Yeah.
no in between.
Either
on
you
that.
hate it or you love it.
I know, that's with Salinger.
Because I think that the character is really honest,
Okay,
and I could relate to the character a lot.
okay, all right. Jonah?
I really like the book The Giver
Oh yes, Lois Lowry.
because I thought that it was something that just sounded so creative, and it was something so unique that nobody had ever really thought of before, and that I definitely haven't thought of before.
Are you a fantasy fan?
I'm a fan of whatever is written well.
That's a good reader. That's what I like to hear. How about you, Alex? Best book ever?
Well, I recently read the Da Vinci Code.
Oh my gosh. Did you like it?
Yeah, I loved it because it was a mystery,
Yeah.
and it kept on going different ways. You could never predict what was going to
Wow.
happen, and I just loved like how you couldn't know, and you kept on trying to guess. You're like, wow, this happened.
Wow. Okay, well then good. So do you like mysteries as a general rule, or adventure
Yeah.
books as a general rule? Well, that's good. I guess mine would be Home of the Brave. It's a brand new one. We're going to talk about it in an upcoming book club by Catherine Applegate, and it's just, I reread it again last night. It made me cry again. You know, it's a beautiful book about a kid from Sudan who comes to America and has to adjust. So that's my suggestion. But the one we have now is called Life as We Knew It. It's by Susan Beth Pfeffer. And I want to thank you guys for coming in
Thank
and talking
you.
about
Thank
it. We'll just give everybody's name again. It's Rebecca Moretti and Jonah Schatz and Alex Mosh, and they are all from Sinai Akiba Middle School in West Los Angeles. And we want to thank their teacher also, Dean Glorioso, for bringing you guys down. I appreciate it. And you're, of course, watching the Book Club of the Year for Young Adults. I'm Kitty Feldy. I hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Have a good afternoon.